Today's episode is sponsored by Midwest Fire. For more than 20 years, Midwest Fire has been manufacturing high-quality tankers, tanker pumpers, and fire rescue vehicles in the United States and Canada. Keeping firefighters safe while enhancing their capabilities is what they do best. To learn more, go to MidwestFire.com.
We can dance, everybody look at your hands. We can dance, everybody's taking the chance. Safe to dance, oh it's safe to dance. Yes, it's safe to dance.
Hello and welcome to episode 233 of the Situational Awareness Matters show. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this show is to improve situational awareness and high-risk decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-stress, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SAMatters mission is simple. We want to help you see the bad things coming and time to avoid bad outcomes. I'm coming to you today from my office in St. Paul, Minnesota, where I just returned from doing a consulting project for the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. This is the second time that I've done work for the shipyard in Portsmouth, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to contribute to the safety of their team. It feels really good to be helping those who protect the protectors. Today's feature segment focuses on the process for developing and maintaining situational awareness. The content that I'll be sharing today is actually part of what would be the beginning of a live event. Except in a live event, of course, there's an audience, so there's a whole lot more interactiveness. With this one, it's just going to be like, a talking head looking into a camera lens. So be sure to tune in next week, though, as I share part 2 of this presentation, where I'll talk about some of the most challenging barriers to situational awareness and offer some tips and tricks and hacks for how to overcome these barriers. All right, let's jump into our feature segment, part 1 of this 2-part episode of understanding situational awareness and the development process. This lesson focuses on what situational awareness is and why does it matter. In this lesson, we're going to learn about why situational awareness is so important, the definition for situational awareness, the process for developing situational awareness, how situational awareness can be eroded, and tips and hacks for improving situational awareness. My name is Rich Gassaway, and I served as a first responder for 30 years. I conducted PhD research on the cognitive neuroscience of high-risk decision-making. I've authored 5 books and over 400 articles on the topics of situational awareness and high-risk decision-making. And I've trained over 67,000 students, including first responders, industrial workers, military personnel, aviation personnel, oil refinery operators, and more. And I live in St. Paul, Minnesota. Let's talk about why situational awareness is so important. The reason situational awareness is so important is it's the foundation for good decision making. Now, it's logical that the better you understand a situation, the better your decision making will be. But there's kind of an odd dichotomy here, and that is you can have terrible situational awareness, horrible situational awareness, and still make a great decision. We call that luck. Now, there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of luck on your side, but when you're making high-risk decisions, I prefer we could figure out a way to program out some of the luck and replace it with a skill set that improves our high-risk decision-making. So let's start with a definition of situational awareness. What is this thing that is now becoming almost a common term or a buzz term used in many industries? Situational awareness is your ability to perceive and understand what is happening in the world around you in relation to how time is passing It's important that we're mindful of how the time passes, because as the time passes, conditions change. And as conditions change, so does awareness. And then, hopefully, be able to accurately predict future events and hopefully do that in time to prevent a bad outcome. So as you're working in your high-risk, high-consequence environment, I'd like you to keep this definition of situational awareness in mind. There's just one problem. It's a big definition, and it's really complex, and there's a lot of words there, and you're going to be under a lot of stress and time compression and a lot of things going on to remember all of this and all the things you're supposed to be paying attention to. So I've made it easy. I've got it down to just 3 words. And if you can just remember those 3 red highlighted words, perceive, understand, and predict, as you're preparing for and doing your high-risk work, you will make great advancements toward developing and maintaining your situational awareness, I promise. Now, I like to describe situational awareness, the 3 steps of perception, understanding, and prediction, using the analogy of building a house. To build a house, you have to have a foundation. On the foundation, you put walls. On the walls, you put a roof. The foundation for situational awareness, where it all begins, is perception. Perception is a process by which you use your 5 senses to gather information about what's happening around you: seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, and smelling. If you were to talk with somebody and ask them, do you have good situational awareness? And if that person said, well, yeah, I do, I think I do. And you were to say, well, how do you know, or what do you do? If that person were to respond by saying, I pay attention, or maybe they'd say, I keep my head on a swivel, or maybe they'd say, I'm always looking up, down, and all around, or I'm actively listening to the things that are happening around me. Or they might say, I assess the situation before I make decisions. If you talk with anybody who describes their situational awareness using any of these terms, they're not wrong. But they're only describing the beginning. There are 2 more component parts to situational awareness beyond paying attention. To perceive anything, you have 5 senses gathering information: eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and skin that feels. Those 5 senses gather information, turn that information into electricity, and send that electricity back into your brain. That information, or electrical impulses, travel down 5 different highways into the brain: a highway for vision, a highway for sound, feel, taste, and smell. Now, to keep this from seeming too complex, because it is a rather complex process, I like to keep things simple. So instead of thinking about electrical impulses traveling down highways into your brain, just think of it as jigsaw puzzle pieces. Your brain is gathering up pieces for a jigsaw puzzle that it's going to try to assemble. So these jigsaw puzzle pieces are being sent into the brain from the 5 different senses, trying to be assembled to give us a common understanding of what is happening around us. Now, there has to be at some point where those 5 highways of information all come together and all get combined. And when that happens, we advance to the second part of the situational awareness development continuum, and that is what we would call the walls of the house, so to speak. And that is what we would term understanding. Understanding means making sense out of what we see, hear, feel, taste, and smell, sometimes called comprehension. Now, as you're trying to understand what's happening in the world around you, you might ask yourself a couple of questions. And I don't mean figuratively, I mean literally. Ask yourself these questions. As you're scanning the world, gathering information, and trying to piece it all together, ask yourself, what does this mean? What is the deeper meaning of the things that I'm seeing as the surface clues or the surface information? There oftentimes is a deeper meaning behind what we're seeing or what we're hearing. And if we just take it at its superficial value, we may miss the real meaning of this information. So asking yourself, what is the deeper meaning? For example, if you see or hear something that just doesn't look or sound right, ask yourself, what does this mean, what I'm hearing or what I'm seeing? The second question you might want to ask yourself is this what I expected to be seeing or hearing? For example, you see something or you hear something and it doesn't seem right, asking yourself, is this normal? Is this what I expected? We come into every situation with expectations. Those expectations can be helpful. They keep us from being surprised or caught off guard. But those expectations can also be harmful because the expectations might cause us to see things that aren't really there because we expected to see them. Or it might cause us to hear things that really wasn't said because we expected to hear it. Or we might not see something that is there because we didn't expect to see it. So the whole process of perception and understanding can be rather complex. It seems so easy. Just see things and understand, or hear things and understand, but it really isn't that easy because of these things that I call barriers to situational awareness. Barriers are anything that block or prevent your ability to have perception, understanding, or prediction. Let me give you an example of a barrier to situational awareness. It's called sensory conflict. What does it mean? It means that the inputs coming into your brain, the puzzle pieces coming into your brain, from two or more of your senses are not in agreement with each other. They're in conflict with each other. For example, your eye sees something that says, what is going on here? The current condition that I'm dealing with, from what I see, is A. But at the very same time, your ears hear something that tells you the condition that's going on isn't A, it's B. Now we have sensory conflict. The inputs coming in from two or more of the senses are not in agreement with each other. Well, what happens when the puzzle pieces don't fit inside the brain? This causes confusion, and your brain doesn't like you to be confused when you're in a high-risk environment, because what your brain knows is if you're confused in a high-risk environment, you're vulnerable to make mistakes and be injured or have someone else get injured or maybe even killed. So your thought processes will shift toward trying to quickly figure out the resolution to this mental confusion. And as your mind shifts out of conscious awareness of what you're doing in the moment, you can experience another situational awareness barrier that I call mind drift. Mind drift means physically you are present, but mentally you are absent. The human mind will drift many times every day. Your mind is probably even going to drift during this discussion. And I have no way of controlling it, and neither do you. Now you might be thinking, well, Rich, if I'm going to sit through your boring program for an hour or 2 hours, of course my mind is going to drift. But if I was doing something high risk or high consequence, I would never let my mind drift, right? Well, that's a wish. Now, boredom does contribute to mind drift because as we get bored, our mind can drift off of task and the vigilance can decline. So we always have to be alert for the fact that when we're doing routine or mundane work, that we can drift out of task and then kind of go into a robotic mode where we're doing things automatically without really thinking about what we're doing. Now, if we have a lot of stored experience with that, our subconscious mind can step in and do the task for us. But sometimes as the mind drifts away and we go into automatic mode, we don't have a lot of stored experiences and then our performance suffers. Now, where in the brain does the jigsaw puzzle pieces get assembled? There has to be some place where what you see, hear, feel, taste, and smell all get combined. And there is a place in the brain where that happens. It's the place where you have consciousness. If this part of your brain were ever damaged in injury or disease, you might live in a permanent comatose state. And I'm going to show you where it happens. It happens right here on your magical, mystical Etch-a-Sketch. And it truly is a magic screen. Everything you see, hear, feel, taste, and smell travel down 5 highways and lands on your Etch-a-Sketch as a picture. If the brain doesn't draw a picture, you don't have any understanding. Now, there's 2 kinds of puzzle pieces. There are positive puzzle pieces. Those are all the puzzle pieces that you can see and hear and feel and taste and smell. And there are also negative puzzle pieces. And these pieces are information you can't see or hear or feel, taste, or smell because they're non-existent. non-existent information. How could non-existent information be valuable in the formation of situational awareness? It can be critically valuable, because stored in the minds of experts are the knowledge of knowing not only what they're seeing and hearing, but what they're not seeing and not hearing that they should be seeing and hearing based on past experiences. And only experts are able to comprehend the meaning of the missing information. Now, the question to be asked is, how long does it take to acquire expert knowledge at a skill? Well, believe it or not, there are actually experts who study expertise. And here's what they can tell us. It takes 10 years, roughly, or 10,000 hours, roughly, of training and practice to develop expertise. Now, some can do it in less time, some take more time. All right, so you have this picture of the puzzle that is assembled on your jigsaw. All right, on the Etch-a-Sketch. So the puzzle pieces all get put together, and then they get snapshotted or screenshotted and sent up into memory. And it's going to do a search of your entire long-term memory database. What it's looking for is past information, past experiences, past training, past knowledge that you have that can help you to figure out what to do in the current situation. Now, the long-term memory search is a huge memory search. The average person's capacity of long-term memory is estimated to be about 10 times all the information stored on the internet. Imagine that. 10 times everything on the internet is the average person's long-term memory capacity. Access, that's a whole other issue. The average person can only consciously access about 5% of their long-term memory database at any given moment, which means 95% of everything that you've ever learned is completely outside of your awareness. So imagine that tiny little gray wedge of knowledge is all your conscious memory, and that big, expansive green piece of the pie is your subconscious knowledge. So you have that picture on your Etch-a-Sketch that gets snapshotted, sent up into memory, and if while doing the search, it finds a match from information from your subconscious knowledge stores, it can trigger the sixth sense. The sixth sense is the only sense that resides inside the brain and sends its information outward. And the sixth sense, it has a name. It's called intuition. Now, the definition for intuition is strange. Intuition means knowing. Without knowing, how we know. Well, how do we know if we don't know how we know? Well, you could have the hair stand up on the back of your neck. You might have that internal voice talking to you, trying to talk you into or out of doing something. You might have a feeling of doom, that your end is near, that somehow your time is up on this planet. Or the most common form of intuition is the gut feeling, that knotted up, squeezed up feeling in our abdomen, which is actually a connection to knowledge in the subconscious brain trying to alert us to the potential for danger. Now, intuition is your brain's single most powerful red flag warning system designed to alert you to the potential for danger. And what makes it so powerful is how big that database is. Look how big that green database is and how tiny that little gray database of your conscious knowledge is. So, the perception is the foundation. The walls are the understanding. Now we got to put a roof on the house. The roof, the highest and perhaps most complex and most challenging part of situational awareness, is prediction. Prediction is the ability to anticipate what's going to happen before it happens. Now, how do we do that? We do that by a couple tricks and hacks and asking ourselves some questions. So the first tip is to begin with the end in mind. Start with the end goal or the objective or the target or the benchmark in mind, and then work your way back to the beginning. Start at the end, work your way back to the start. The reason it's so important to get that benchmark or target in mind is we can start down the pathway of doing our work and we can forget where we were going. We can forget what we were supposed to be doing. And some of the things that can cause us to get off track are a couple of situational awareness barriers called distractions and interruptions. Distractions are anything that draw your attention away by accident. You're going along doing your work, and all of a sudden a loud noise or a bright light or some kind of commotion occurs, and your attention is drawn away to say, what is that? What's going on over there? That's a distraction. An interruption is anything that draws your attention away on purpose. Somebody comes up to talk to you, somebody calls you on the phone, somebody calls you on a radio. That's an interruption. Regardless of whether it's a distraction or interruption, your attention then shifts over to whatever is now holding your attention. And a distraction is likely to hold your attention only for a short period of time, and then you're going to maybe come back to task. But interruptions can take a lot longer, because that person who's interrupting your work or your thought process can carry on a conversation or ask you questions that engage in a dialogue that can keep you off task for minutes, maybe even hours. And then you have to figure out, where did I leave off? What was I doing? And figure out how to come back onto task. As you're trying to predict your future, you might want to ask yourself, what bad things might happen if I don't follow safety best practices or the safety rules? So you're actually thinking about, in advance, what would happen if I didn't do what I know are the best practices, and kind of thinking your way through these potential outcomes. This question forces you to think about future outcomes, future events. If I do this, what might happen? What are the potential consequences? What are the possibilities that could occur if I didn't do things according to what best practice are? And there's some reasons why people don't, and we'll cover those in a little bit. As you're trying to predict your future, you might also set some expectations. Those expectations would be set by asking some questions. What can I do to prevent a bad outcome? So you first have to think, what are the potential bad outcomes that could occur? And then ask yourself, what could I do proactively that might prevent a bad outcome from occurring? You might ask yourself, how much time do I have to accomplish a task? Or how much time should it take to accomplish a task? Or do I want to commit the time needed to accomplish the task? And all of these things might keep us from trying to rush to a conclusion or to start something that we're figuring out we're not able to finish, and then we might take shortcuts to try to get it done too quickly. So here's something to think about, or you could have a discussion among yourselves, is what causes workers to take shortcuts to best practices or safety procedures. And there are a lot of potential explanations, and I've just put a few up here for you to consider. They might be in denial that anything is going wrong, their ego, fear, a sense of urgency, complacency, boredom, defiance. They're unaware that what they're doing is not best practice. They're not able to get it done. They're not willing to get it done. Maybe they're just being lazy. Maybe they think they know better than the best practice is dictating. Maybe they're rushed or feel like there's an urgency for a deadline, or they're being pressured by someone to do something in a different way or a quicker way instead of best practice. Are the conditions favorable for you to accomplish the task? Sometimes the conditions are favorable and we engage in the task, but sometimes the conditions aren't favorable and people still engage in the task, even though when interviewed afterwards, they'll say, I knew the conditions weren't right, but they still took the risk. They still took the gamble. And there's some explanations as to why they might do this, but ask yourself, are these favorable conditions to accomplish the task that I have to get done? Then you might also ask yourself, do I have the right resources to accomplish this task safely? All of this really leads up to the explanation that we're actually not developing a single situational awareness, but 5 different situational awarenesses. The first is the personal awareness. That's your look in the mirror, your self-assessment of your knowledge, skills, abilities, fears, phobias, fitness, stamina, all the things about you and your ability to get your work done efficiently and safely. Second is the team awareness, your knowledge of the other people on the team, their knowledge, skills, abilities, fears, phobias, fitness, and stamina, and where your weak links are and the things that you need to do to try to shore up the weak links on your team. The third awareness is the resource awareness, your knowledge of all the other resources that are available to you, all their capacities, all their limitations, their availability, how quick you can deploy those resources when you need them, all the non-human resources. The fourth awareness is your actual work activity awareness, that of the environment around you in the work that you're doing, of the conditions, the changing conditions, things that could be distracting for you, priorities that you need to be concerned with, information you need to gather, all about the things related to the actual work that you're performing. The fifth and final awareness is maybe the toughest of all five, and that is shared awareness. Your ability to share your understanding with others and to have others to share their understanding with you through communications, verbal and nonverbal communications. And communications is difficult under the best of conditions. When you add stress and pressure and consequence and changing conditions, communications can be very challenging. To be able to predict the future, you have to use your imagination. Stated another way is using your mind's eye to see what's going to happen before it happens. So let me sum up the situational awareness development process. It starts with perception, gathering information, looking, listening, smelling, feeling, tasting. Taking that information, turning it into electricity or puzzle pieces, and sending them down to the Etch-a-Sketch, where the jigsaw puzzle gets assembled. You assess your conscious and unconscious knowledge, trying to figure out how to put the puzzle together. Once the puzzle is put together, then you get to the point where you make a decision. A decision is where you determine your course of action. Now, oftentimes, what I'll ask people in a class is what happens after the decision. And inevitably, the answer that I get is you take an action. And usually when people are learning about decision making, the action does follow the decision, but I'm going to ask you to insert another step before you go to action, and that is prediction. I would like for you to think about your decision and then visualize the outcome of your decision prior to implementation. And if the prediction of your outcome is a good one, then engage in the task. But if the prediction of the outcome is not good, then don't engage in the task, but rather go back and think of another possible outcome, another possible decision that you could make until you find one that you can reasonably say would have a good outcome. There are three major factors that influence safe decision making. First is stress. The more stress you're under, the more challenging high-risk, high-consequence decision-making can be. Human factors, those things that because we are human, we have some limitations as to how quickly we can process information, and some things that can happen as the brain starts to be influenced by chemicals and neurotransmitters, and we go into this fight or flight and stress reaction mode and automatic performance mode, and these human factors can influence our decision making as well, and situational awareness. So stress, human factors, and situational awareness all come together to influence our safe decision making.
I think Rich's ability to connect with any crowd, that's a gift that he has, and it's easily transferable.
This is the second or third time that I've heard him speak. There's some teeth to the information that he brings.
It's been really good. Good mixes. He knows when to throw in a joke here and there to get you back involved.
Some tools. I'm a new lieutenant, so very, very interesting. And some of these things I can take back to the station and use with some of the new firefighters I have on my crew.
Something to get you thinking about your job more, big picture type stuff. I've seen him before. A good review for sure.
I have heard him before, yes. After he speaks, there's usually an enlightenment because now they're more aware of what's going on around them and what they're experiencing as they're responding to calls.
He's very, very knowledgeable. I'm enjoying it so far.
And that intuition That's a big one. The video that you just showed up here, we're getting a lot out of this. I think this is a really good seminar, especially for new people and old. So I think it's very informative. This talk gives us more ammunition to do all three.
They're relatable to what we have experienced or very well could experience, so it makes it easy to let the knowledge sink in.
I mean, it's awesome. A lot of stories you can usually relate to yourself and calls you have been on, aha moment. Like, he just helps you focus on picking out the right things. It's awesome. It's a refresher and keeps my eyes open. It's good stuff.
If people listen to the message that he has, it's an incredible message delivered by a very compassionate person. Strategy and tactics are going to always change. Situational awareness it doesn't change. It's always there.
He's got some good stories to tell, and he's very thorough with his stories, and it's interesting listening to him.
Very clear speaker, and he talks on our level because he's been there, he's been in the trenches. I think he's doing well, and I'm looking forward to the second half.
Since 2007, SAMatters instructors have helped more than 1,200 organizations and over 67,000 individuals improve high-risk decision-making, including first responders, industrial workers, military personnel, business leaders, medical professionals, utility workers, school bus drivers, highway workers, aviation workers, oil refinery operators, and more. If you work in a high-risk, high-consequence decision-making environment, we're here to help improve your safety and your survival, and to help you accomplish the most important goal of all, and that's to go home to the ones who love you.
Welcome to Chief Miller. Chief Miller operates the largest social media page dedicated to the men and women of the fire service from around the world. Check him out on Instagram at Chief_Miller. Find him on Twitter at Chief_Miller. And check out the website where you can find Chief Miller Apparel at chiefmillerapparel.com.
I'd like to take a moment to thank the companies and organizations and agencies and departments that have hosted some recent Situational Awareness Matters training for their team members. Fire Rescue International in Dallas, Texas. The Northwest Fire District in Houston, Texas. The Missouri City Fire Department in Missouri City, Texas. The Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard in Honolulu, Hawaii. Eagle Materials Corporation, Grapevine, Texas. The Odessa Fire Department in Odessa, Texas. The Columbia Shoe Swap Regional District in Salmon Arm, British Columbia. And the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in Kittery, Maine. If you're interested in attending one of our upcoming programs, on October 12th, I'll be at the Minnesota State Fire Chiefs Association Conference in St. Paul, Minnesota. October 13 and 14 at the Boggs Run Volunteer Fire Department in Benwood, West Virginia. October 17th at the Association of Canadian Ergonomists Conference in Sudbury, Ontario. October 19th, the Loudoun County Fire Officers Seminar, Loudoun County, Virginia. October 28th, Clearwater Regional Fire Service Conference in Alberta, Canada. November 3 and 4, the Anderson County Fire Department, just outside of Greenville, South Carolina. November 7th, the University Heights Fire Department in University Heights, Ohio. November 8th, the Volunteer in Combination Officers Section, Symposium in the Sun in Clearwater Beach, Florida. October 14th, the Rogue Interagency Training Association Conference in Medford, Oregon. November 19, the Shoreline Fire Department in Shoreline, Washington. And then November 24 through December 11, Syncrude Oil Refinery, Fort McMurray, Alberta. To see the locations of all the upcoming Situational Awareness Matters tour stop events, head over to the SAMatters.com website and click on the blue box on the right side of the homepage labeled Live Training Dates. If you're interested in hosting a program, just click on the Contact Us tab on the top of the SAMatters homepage and I'll give you a call. If you want to be part of the SAMatters community of learners, there's a couple ways you can do that. Just check the show notes for how to get connected with us through our newsletter membership, podcast subscribers, YouTube subscribers, and how to follow us on the social media channels of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. There we share ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to improve the skills of critical thinking and resilient problem solving. Well, that's it. Episode 233 of the SAMatters show is complete. Thank you to our awesome sponsors, Midwest Fire and Chief Miller. Thank you to all the companies, agencies, and organizations that have hosted Situational Awareness Matters programs. Thank you to all the organizations that have hosted the virtual, internet-based training events. Thank you to the more than 2,500 students and graduates of the highly acclaimed Situational Awareness Matters Online Academy. And most importantly, thank you, the listeners and viewers of this show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SAMatters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gassaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit SAMatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgassaway.com.